Today, and with the first pick, summer scouting continues and returning our attention to the edge rushers and what feels like could be a loaded 2026 draft class. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's former NFL defensive lineman Douzable. This is episode 282. And because I know you're wondering, there are 266 days to the 2026 NFL draft in Pittsburgh, PA. How you doing, LD?
I'm good. I see you got the clock in the background counting the days down, Ryan. Have you always had that? Because I know before, like, you used to have like a whiteboard. Now you done got bougie on this, right? It's digital. You got it digital.
Here's what happened
behind us. So, I mean, let me hold something. They must be paying you well.
Man, you got a bunch of trophies back there. You're doing all right. I'll tell you exactly how we got this countdown board. Our good buddy Rick Spielman, who is now with your New York Jets, insisted on knowing every single minute of every single day until the next draft cycle. And I did used to have a whiteboard, an old school flip board, like I was working the Fenway Park stands and keeping score that way. And I upgraded, and then Rick up and left. So now it's me, you, and Rand having to appreciate it. By the way, we've hit every offensive position in our summer scouting series. You can check that out in the old podcast feed. And our buddy Rand is on a well-deserved vacation with his family this week. He'll be back next week, but I'm happy to have my guy Lige here. Played in the NFL for more than a decade, and now he is my colleague at CBS Sports. Before we get going talking about some of these defensive linemen or edge rushers in particular, Lige, let's take a turn and talk about some up-to-date NFL news, because as we sit here on July 31st, 2025, year of our Lord, there's a football game tonight, the Hall of Fame game. Football returns, Lions and the Chargers, and I'll let you take this in any direction you want to take it in, understanding this is a draft show. Who are you interested in seeing tonight?
A lot to see in tonight's game. I know people will scoff and say it's the Hall of Fame. We're not going to see guys like Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, but we get real football, right? It's been like, 6-7 months since we've had real football. So, I'm excited for this game. Yeah, again, we're not going to see Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? We're not going to see J-Mo there. We're not going to see Derwin James. But some of the names that I want to highlight, a few draft picks from the Chargers last year: Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith, two receivers that will play in this game that are rookies, and they'll probably be vying for that number 3 receiver spot, right behind Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston. And Trey Harris was a guy, when you go back to last year in college football, I believe he was top 5, right? Not only versus man coverage, but in zone coverage and getting open. The dude just knew how to get open, and I think the tell of the tape is anytime Trey Harris got banged up, the Ole Miss offense struggled. When he was in the game, they were explosive. That lets you know how good he is. Keandre Lambert-Smith was a guy that was at Penn State, transferred to Auburn, and he's a guy that can really take the top off the defense. So I'm really excited to see those guys. One more guy from the Chargers I'm excited to see. Obviously, Trey Lance is going to get the news clippings and headlines. But let's talk about somebody on defense. Tremont Morris-Brash, outside linebacker. He's going to be vying for outside linebacking position, probably 4 or 5 on that Chargers team. You got Bud Dupree there, obviously. You have Tui there as well, and Khalil Mack. He's right in the fold, right behind those guys, getting outside linebacker number 4. So he's a guy that had a pick 6 versus Trey Lance last year in the last preseason game when Trey Lance was with the Dallas Cowboys. So those are my guys from the Chargers. If we go over to the Lions, Rye, there's a couple guys, right? Hendon Hooker. I know me and you both scouted him when he came out. A lot of people thought he could go first round, ends up having the knee injury. It gets drafted a little bit later. They bring in Teddy Bridgewater last year. Now he kind of can solidify himself behind Jared Goff as a true number 2 for the Detroit Lions. And then the coordinator position. Let's not forget, the Lions have 2 new coordinators, not only on offense, but on defense as well. My guy, Kelvin Shepard, this will be the first time he's calling plays in the NFL. They have groomed him for this position. He is definitely ready, so I'm excited to see him go out there, do his thing. And then John Morton, who has a ton of experience, who has called plays before, left Detroit, went to the Denver Broncos last year and came back once Ben Johnson got the job with the Chicago Bears, and now he's the offensive coordinator. What will this offense look like? He's already come out and said, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. This offense was already explosive. We're going to continue to do the same things we did last year. So looking forward to those two in their debuts as play callers for the Detroit Lions.
LD is a one-man promo for why people should watch the Hall of Fame game, because as you point out, people sometimes scoff at the idea that it's not quote-unquote real football. A couple names you didn't mention, I'll happily mention here. Chargers first-round pick Amari Hampton. Looks like he's going to get a lot of run, the running back, and that'll be fun. Fingers crossed everyone stays healthy, because he's going to have a chance to be a big part of that offense, and we know exactly how Jim Harbaugh wants that offense to look, and Greg Roman in particular, even if Justin Herbert continues to grow as a passer. Also, you mentioned Trey Lance. DJ Uiagalelei is there. Yep. And let's start with this before we move on. Trey Lance and DJU are both examples of guys, insane athleticism coming out of school. One was a 5-star. Mm-hmm. Trey Lance with the North Dakota State didn't play his last year because of COVID, still was the 3rd overall pick. And Brock Purdy happened to him in San Francisco. DJU started at Clemson after Trevor Lawrence. Split time with Cade Klubnik for a bit. Then he went to Oregon State. And then he finished at FSU, where he got hurt and didn't finish the year last year and went undrafted. And it just goes to show you that as draft analysts, as much as people try to bang the table on social media or whatever, we do not know how this is going to play out, because you build someone in the lab, they look like DJU. And he had a bunch of hiccups, and it didn't work out for him. But explain, as someone who did not get drafted and probably should have gotten drafted, what this opportunity means in the preseason for these guys.
Yeah, this is massive. Both of these guys are kind of like reclamation projects, and they couldn't be under a better coach in Jim Harbaugh. Let's not forget, they have a similar skill set than Colin Kaepernick had, right? And we saw what Jim Harbaugh ended up doing with him. A lot of people thought Alex Smith was a really good quarterback. He was a Pro Bowl type quarterback, but Jim Harbaugh felt like they could get a little bit more explosive on offense with Colin Kaepernick. And when you look at Trey Lance, and let me stop this. I'm not saying that this is a quarterback competition. Justin Herbert is the quarterback, because I don't want people saying, Jay Douzable said Trey Lance could potentially be Colin. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying Jim Harbaugh has a record of taking guys like this, reclamation projects, and getting the best out of them. And for Trey Lance, to me, this is his opportunity to prove not that he could be a future starter in the NFL, but that he's a viable quarterback. I mean, I just go back to last year with the Dallas Cowboys after they traded for him, that last preseason game, 5 interceptions, right? And a pick 6 in that game. Now, we ended up playing in the Week 18 game versus the Commanders and looked a lot better, but the inconsistencies, and to your point, he hasn't played a lot of football. Do you know, as a number 3 overall pick in the 2021 draft class, he's only played in 12 regular season games. 6 of those happened in his rookie year, and a lot of it was mop-up duty. So he hasn't had extensive work to get that experience. So this is a great experience for him, because he'll probably get the whole first half. And DJU, to me, it's all about just understanding the operation, being clean, playing clean football, going out, offensive coordinator gives you a call, regurgitate it to the team properly, make sure everybody's lined up where they need to be. And then when you're back there, just go through your progressions and get the ball out of your hands and get it to your playmakers. We talked about some of the young playmakers he's going to have out there. Some of those guys can really go. So just get it to your playmakers in space. Don't try to live outside yourself. Live within the offense, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and one, I think that the biggest takeaways for me, having watched football my entire life, is that if you're a second or third string quarterback playing the Hall of Fame game, offensive line probably isn't going to be great. So first, second read, get it out. Don't be a hero. I think that's the lesson there. But this is going to be fun, and I'm excited to have football back. Honestly, it feels like it never left, but here we are, July 31st. It is go time. All right, let's take a quick break, Lige. When we come back, we're going to get into our top 5 edge rushers in this 2026 class. We'll hit it right after this break. All right, Lige, let's take a look at last year's summer scouting consensus with the first pick rankings, and I'll let you grade these. These are from me and our buddy Rick Spielman and Mike Renner, and this is what we came up with collectively. Number 1, James Pierce Jr., who was all about fighting at Falcons camp right now, the 26th overall pick, and in part because nobody can block him. So he's doing his job. Number 2, Mykel Williams ended up going 11th overall to the 49ers. JTT ended up being a second-round pick to the Colts, I believe. Nick Scorton, second-rounder, and Jack Sawyer ended up being a fourth-rounder to the Steelers. All told, I feel pretty good about this list, given that, we're about 9 months out from the draft or whatever.
Yeah, that wasn't a bad list at all. I would say you probably had Abdul Carter as a off-ball linebacker, I'm assuming. Right.
And we didn't know what it was going to look like because he had only played off-ball linebacker, and he got a name check
Correct.
in the conversation. But otherwise, Abdul Carter aside, I feel pretty good about that list.
No, that's actually a really good list. I mean, 4 of your 5 guys went in the top 2 rounds, right? And then your last guy went in the 4th round. So I would say percentage-wise, that's actually a really good hit rate for you, Rye.
Yeah, and I love me some Jack Sawyer, and you got on me by his little T-Rex arm, so that didn't help him. That's why he ended up being a 4th-round pick. He feels like a Steeler. The other first-rounders, Jalen Walker, another hybrid sort of player because he can play off ball and certainly can play on the edge. Shamar Stewart, not a ton of production, and then the issues with the Bengals is another conversation there. Donovan Ezeraku ended up being the first edge rusher in round 2, and he was on the radar, but undersized, and his ability to play against the run were the questions. Apparently, he's been lights out at Cowboys camp, so that's also good to hear. All right, producer Sharon, let's take a look.
Quick, Ryan. Where'd you have Mike Green in your summer scouting? Where was Mike Green on your list?
Mike Green, I think we did not talk about him, and it wasn't until maybe late summer, early fall that he sort of popped on the radar, and he popped on the radar big time because you and I both loved the way he played. Had the off-field issues, fell to the 2nd round to the Ravens, but it just feels like a Ravens pick that's going to be a grand slam once he gets on the field. Yeah, no, that's a good question. And the other thing is this, that just points to there's so many guys that we talk about, and there's going to be a bunch of guys we are not talking about that are going to explode into the scene. Thanks. So maybe it takes what is a good edge rush class. I don't think it's as deep as last year's on paper right now, and makes it a great edge rush class once we get to that point. 28 guys were drafted last year at edge rush, Lige, 5 in the 1st round, 5 in the 2nd, 6 in the 3rd. One of the names that pops out to me, I think it's sort of funny, and Princely Umanmielen, his brother, Prince Will Umanmielen, who transferred from Nebraska to Ole Miss, is also going to be in this conversation as we get through the draft process. All right, let's look at our top 5 edge rush rankings for with the first pick, summer scouting, as we sit here. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Lige, I'm gonna make some changes, and this is because you and I talked about Keldric Faulk yesterday. I gone back and watched him a few days ago because a peek behind the curtain. I watch all these guys in May, and then I take June off to do stuff with my family, so they don't try to get rid of me. And then I circle back, and there have been a lot of buzz about Keldric, so I went back and watched him, and I'll give you my rankings, and I'll give you Rand's as well, because he sent him along because that's how Rand rolls, even though he's on vacation. Both he and I had T.J. Parker number 1 out of Clemson. Keldric Faulk was number 2 for Rand. I moved him up to number 2 after rewatching him again. Reuben Bain out of Miami, who's going to be a little controversial, and you and I will talk about him, at number 3 for me, number 4 for Rand. Tyreak Sapp out of Florida I had next. And Tyreak was 1 ahead of Reuben Bain at number 3 for Rand. And then R. Mason Thomas, who is the only sort of guy who isn't 270 plus. He's closer to 250, maybe a little less than that, a little juice off the edge. And you talked about that yesterday when we had a conversation. And at number 5 on Rand's list is DJU's brother, Mateo Uyunglele, who's also young. I have him a little further down on my list, and we'll spend time in the fall talking about him. But consensus rankings, let's start with Keldric Faulk at number 5, who has since been moved up to number 2, but it is what it is right now. He's a first-round pick all day long. And I told you, when I watched him the first time, I must have had some reservations about him, because when I went back and rewatched him, I thought maybe I'd written his name down wrong. I'll just give you this. Unofficially 6'6", 288. He is 19 years old. He won't turn 20 for 2 more months, and they line him up everywhere. 0 technique, 3 technique on third downs. They'll line him up at 7 technique, and I think he needs to get better as a pass rusher. But again, my man is not 20 years old, and in terms of setting the edge, he is crushing it in the SEC. So I'll let you take over because you were higher on him from the beginning, and I'm coming to this party late, sadly.
Yeah, honestly, Ryan, he's pushing T.J. Parker for my number 1 guy, just summer-wise heading into the fall camp. Crazy upside. You talked about it, only 19 years old, hasn't even turned 20 yet going into his 3rd year. You see the length on tape, 6'6", 285, 288, somewhere in that range. And he uses it well to stack and shock and get extension on offensive linemen and then get off of blocks as well. At times, though, just want him to be a little bit more consistent at the point of attack, because there's times, Rod, like you go in that Alabama game And he just dominated their O-line at times. And then you turn on tape with other teams, and it just isn't consistent. And you talked about it. His prowess as a pass rusher really isn't there yet, but he has all the tool set, right? They'll slant him a lot, and you see the strength in his lower body to be able to split offensive linemen and get to the quarterback. And then he has really good fluid hips where even though he's 6'6" and 285, usually guys like that, right, are stiff. He can flip and get on the edge. You see him against Armand Membu right there, who was a first-round pick who went to my Jets last year. You see it, 7 sacks, 45 total tackles. But he's a guy that has ridiculous upside. To me, he can be a 4-3 based in a 4-3 scheme, or he can even put on 10, 15 pounds and be a big end in a 3-4 head up on the offensive tackle, which, to Ryan's point, they used him a lot at Auburn doing that. He slanted inside, slanted outside. Again, with that arm length, being able to knock offensive tackles back, disengage, and get to in the backfield and create havoc, that's what he can do. So honestly, on this list, just going through the tape that I went through the last few days, he's pushing the number 1 spot because his upside is through the roof.
And that's the thing. And you and I were talking about not a true comp, but a loose comp for him. And before I get to that, I just want to mention all but 2 of his sacks came on 3rd down last year. That also is important. You're not getting first and 50 sacks in the first quarter when it doesn't matter. But I want to bring up a name, and this young man was much older coming out. He had transferred already from Texas A&M to Texas Tech, and he was 23, I believe, in his draft. Tyree Wilson, top 10 pick. The Raiders had the foot injury, and it's just not worked out yet, injury or otherwise. I don't know why. But if you see glimpses of that in Keldric, in terms of the length, and by the way, 6'6", 288 is bonkers for an edge rusher. The difference for me is the fact that he is so incredibly young, and he doesn't even know what he's doing yet. And what you said to me yesterday when we talked, if a coach gets his hands on him and knows what he's doing, that could be a wrap.
And that's the thing, right? And that's why I think versatility-wise, why I would maybe move him up on this list, because there's so much to do with him. He's like a bowl of clay right now. He just needs to be molded. The skill set is there. He does things naturally that a lot of people can't even do with coaching, as far as his natural ability to play with extension, right? A lot of times, right, you see guys play like all tight like this, and you can't really get that extension to see or diagnose the play. He's always locked out, right? I just need him to be consistent and disengaging. Now, again, that Bama tape, which again, Pitts was probably running a little hot. That's the rivalry game. So you're going to have some juice in that game. And anytime you're playing guys that you probably grew up playing against, you're going to want to put your best foot forward, right? So to your point, not even 20 years old, still young, still developing. You want him to be a more precise pass rusher, but that's going to come with coaching. Again, the things that he does naturally, that's what I always look at on tape. Like, can I coach that? Can I coach the natural ability? Does he have the natural ability to be able to just naturally flip his hips, get skinny, and be able to split guys and get into the backfield? And he has all those tool sets. So I'm really high on him. I can't wait to see how he performs this fall.
Yeah, so again, I apologize to Keldric Faulk and his family for having him number 5, because he is actually revised number 2 on my list, but I didn't want to throw the graphics team into it until trying to sort that out. So I'll own that one. Before we go to break, though, I'll ask you this. Tell me when to stop. I'm going to read you out the last year's first-round picks, or from 2 months ago, the 2025 class of edge rushers, and you tell me where Keldric Faulk is going to, whether you would take Keldric Faulk over this person. Abdul Carter, 3rd overall.
No.
Mykel Williams at 11.
Yes.
Whoa!
Based off the summer tape, I would. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to number 4 on our list. And I look forward to playing that game with you for the rest of the show. And we'll do that right after this break. All right, Leger, number 4 on our consensus with the first pick, edge rush summer scouting list. LT Overton out of Alabama. He's not even 21 years old yet. No surprise. I think Keldric Faulk's going to be I think he's going to have a chance to be a first rounder, and probably a pretty high first rounder. I think LT is going to be in that conversation as well, maybe closer to the bottom first round, top of the second. We'll see. We got a long way to go. But again, this is going to be a recurring theme. 6'5", 280 is unofficially what LT Overton is. Plays outside. He can play over the tackle. Sometimes to kick him inside. He can play 2-eye if you want him to. Sawed off, thick upper body, consistently plays with violent hands, gets off blocks quickly. He can ragdoll interior offensive lineman to the ground on his way to the running back, which is fun to watch. And I'll ask you this. I've asked Kyle, our buddy Kyle Long,
Mm.
this, who played guard in the league. How do you combat, if you're an offensive lineman, the push-pull? Because I feel like when these guys that are 288 with big, strong hands get their hands on you, you just going along for the ride, even though you're a 310-pound guard or center.
Yeah, right. It's a chess game, right? And you have to understand when you're an offensive lineman, what the defensive lineman is doing. Adversely, the same thing when you're a defensive lineman, what the offensive lineman is trying to take away from you. So when a guy comes with power, right, as a defensive lineman, I'm waiting for you to anchor down. And that's when I can push pull you, right? Because you're off balance because all your weight is sitting back because you think I'm just going for the bull rush the entire time. So that's why I say, like, defensive line play, offensive line play, it's a chess game, right? It's you try to take away what they do well, but then also counter that as well. And LT Overton, you talked about it, versatility, and he's probably the biggest guy on this list weight-wise. It is interesting when I was watching this tape, I was like, why isn't this dude just lining up at 3 technique most of the time, or even a 4-eye head up on the tackle? But then you see him outside and he drops in zone coverage and he's athletic enough to do it, right? And it's rare for somebody that size at like 6'3", 280 pounds to be able to cover in space, but he does it really well. And then he doesn't have crazy foot speed. It's a theme of like the top 5 guys. There's not a lot of guys that are twitchy, but he can flip his hips and get on the edge at 280. So it'll be interesting to see how teams view him. We had the same conversation with Keldric Faulk, but I think it's even a bigger conversation with LT Overton just because of his pure size, right? Like it's rare to have somebody that's 280, 285 to be able to move the way he does. And we've seen a premise or an uptick of guys that are versatile, like the John Franklin Myers of the draft that can play end and also kick inside on third down. I think that's what LT Overton will be his next spot in the NFL. A guy maybe on first and second down, you either line him head up on the tackle or on the edge, but then on third down, let him get inside and use the athletic ability to rush over guards.
Yeah, this ain't Will Anderson Jr. or Dallas Turner in terms of guys coming out of Alabama off the edge. Let me give you my comp. Rick always hated my comps. Rand's a little nicer, but he typically disagrees with them. And then you can give me a better one if you have one. And this was a tough one because of the things we're talking about physically. Darius Smith, how you feel about that?
That's actually not a bad comp. I would say Darius has a little bit more foot speed than him, can burn the edge probably a little bit better than him. The funny thing is when you watch tape, and Ryan, we talked about this, with Alabama, D linemen, D tackles, it's almost like rinse and repeat. Like all these guys are good with their hands. They all disengage. They always get good knockback, and they're just solid football players. Like you know what you're going to get with a defensive lineman from Alabama. He's going to be a solid player for you for 8 to 10 years. And LT Overton is going to fit that mold just like the rest of the defensive tackles. When you talk about Byron Young or any of these other guys, Deron Payne, like they are just really good football players.
Yep. All right. Let's stay in the SEC and go to number 3 in our consensus with the first pick list. Summer scouting edge rushers. Tyreak Sapp out of Florida, home of Rand Carthon. And he's old. He's 22. He'll be 23 in a couple months. And that's not old. And he's also light.
He used to be real
6'2".
young.
I know. Tell me about it, man. He's light for this conversation. He's unofficially 6'2", 272. Again, that's enormous historically for edge rushers. And also, not surprisingly, they line him up everywhere. He'll kick inside and pass rush situations. Right. I like to mention this when I see this. He's a 2-time SEC academic honor rollee, so shout out to him for that part of it. 8 sacks last year. He is an absolute plus run defender because the power, the leverage, the low base, and he plays that way consistently. So that's one less thing you have to worry about. He can play the run because you and I talked about Donovan Mazaraku earlier. He was 238, 245 at BC. The run was a concern first half of the season. I thought he got better in the second half last year, but that's not going to be an issue when we talk about Sapp. Again, plays with heavy hands, and every one of these guys at 275 plus feels like they play with heavy hands. Get off blocks because they're so strong. Gets into gaps and can be disruptive in the run game. What did you see about Tyreak Sapp that perhaps you liked, and maybe some things that you didn't like? Because I'm not sure where he ranked on your list because Keldric, Faulk, and TJ Woods, who we'll talk about, are 1 and 1A, it sounds like.
Yeah, he would have probably been like number 4 or 5 on my list.
Okay.
versatility, like you talked about, they reduced him sometimes and put him at 3 technique. You saw on that bear front, and when I say bear front, 2 outside linebackers, you have 2 D tackles over the guard, and then you have a head up, nose tackle over the center. Plays with really good length, has long arms. You talked about it, right? Really good in the run game, plays with good extension. But I like his swipe move. He actually can get on the edge and burn the edge a little bit. Again, foot speed isn't quite there. He's a bigger edge guy at like 270, 272, but also has the versatility. And just like LT Overton, right? Drops in zone coverage. Florida will drop him in zone coverage, even though he's 270 plus. So a really solid player. I don't have him as high as some of these other guys that we're going to talk about on this list, but a solid player nonetheless.
Yeah, and the other thing about some of these guys we're talking about, at least the ones we've talked about thus far, is that they don't have an array of pass rush moves because you know this. When you're the biggest guy growing up, you can just run over people. And if you watch that Miami game from 2024, Tyreak had his hands full with Francis Mauigoa, I got to get that right, the pronunciation. The right tackle out of Miami, who we talked about in summer scouting earlier, and he has a chance to be a high first-round pick as well. So you want to see those good-on-good matchups, and you also want to see over the course of the summer how much better can these bull rush experts, if you will, get better at using their hands and developing their pass rush moves, because that can be the difference between being a third-round pick and being a top 32 guy. How hard is it to develop those pass rush moves if you're used to just bullying everybody in the place?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, Ryan, because I think what's not talked about enough is the development throughout the offseason. Like, since the tape that we just watched came last season, you had a full spring workout. You had spring practice to really hone in on your skills and work on that. Then you have summer workouts where, again, you're working on your craft that entire time. And it's a lot different, like when I was in college. And again, I won't say when I was in college, like I was in college 30 years ago, but it's still a lot different. A lot of these young guys, they actually go to like pass rush specialists in the offseason. Like, I see guys with BT Jordan who works for the Denver Broncos and also has his own personal thing. Like, college guys going to train with him when they have time off. I mean, that's what the NIL will do to you. You can buy you a plane ticket and go travel to a pass rush specialist in the offseason and really hone in on your craft, where when I played, like, there were rules where you could only be with the coaches so often. So a lot of times it was just you and the guys out there working on your craft, right? You weren't really going to different coaches. Now, maybe spring break you went if you had a couple of days to work with a coach or something like that. But these guys throughout the whole offseason, they can work with pass rush specialists to really hone in on their craft. So that's what I always like to see. Like, the jump from what we saw in the summer to that next season. Did you hone in on your craft? Perfect example. A guy that we talked about, a guy that I really love, Jermaine Johnson. The growth that I saw from him from Georgia to Florida State, but then from Florida State and the draft process to the Senior Bowl, like, that was a major jump. And you could tell that he really honed in on his craft. And you like to see that players they care about their craft. Like, it's important to them. And I know that really resonated with teams, more specifically for the Jets, because I know for a fact they were trying to trade up as high as 15 to go get him in the draft. He ends up falling to him, I believe, at pick 22 or 26, something like that. But I know they tried to trade up even higher to get him because of what they saw in the process that he took throughout the draft.
Yeah, funny story. A couple funny stories. Rick Spielman has known Jermaine since high school because his son played with Jermaine in Minnesota, and he was over at Rick's house kicking it back in the day. So he's known Jermaine forever. And I remember talking to Jermaine at the Combine, and he felt like he had to prove that the ACC was a legit place to play because he had transferred from the SEC, Georgia, I believe. I'm like, man, you dominated everyone. I don't think it mattered what conference you were playing in. The other thing is, I'm glad you mentioned my guy BT Jordan. I've known BT since 2019 when he was Brandon. Like, he's so big now. He's got initials for first name. In 2022, when he was at Michigan State, I went out there in March, and he had 100 guys, including Ndamukong Suh, who you mentioned earlier, working out with him, and it's grown. He might have 300 guys now in terms of the people that he works with. He had made stops, as you mentioned, in Denver, made stops in Seattle, and that's an example of someone who kept their head down and did their job and is developing these guys, and the results are there.
And to your point, right, he has a pass rush summit every year. And this year, I believe it was at Arizona State, and he had over like 60 NFL guys, right? Just showing you, like, if you put your head down and work consistently, good players will come to you because they want to hone in and work on their craft. And like I said, it's not just pro players now. it's the high school and college level with these NIL deals. Like guys can afford to be able to travel and get the training necessary to really elevate their game to get ready for the season coming up.
Yeah, and he grew up in New Orleans, and he was an offensive lineman in college back in the day. Had an injury, and he transferred to being a pass rush specialist, and he has done a fantastic job. So shout out to BT Jordan. I'm glad you brought him up. It's always good to see him when we get in the spring part of the pre-draft process. But for now, LD, we're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to get to number 2 on our list, potentially controversial guy, Reuben Bain Jr. out of the U. We'll talk about Reuben right after this. All right, LD, in the break, producer Sharon was telling about his $7 gas station T-shirts that are some of the best. If someone said to you could get gas station T-shirts for $7, they're the best T-shirts you ever wore, what would you say to that?
They're telling the truth because I used to live at those gas stations getting those shirts in college. You remember the tall tee, the tall tee era? That's where we got our shirts from, the gas station.
I think it must be a Florida thing because I never heard of shopping at the gas station.
It's probably a South thing.
Yeah, because Rand turned producer Sharon onto him because Rand wears them. Rand is admittedly cheap, but apparently these T-shirts are the thing. Yeah, all right. Well, I'm going to have to look into that.
It's a big thing in Florida. Yeah.
All right, also a big thing in Florida, Reuben Bain Jr., 6'3", 275. And producer Sharon is a U guy. Rand sometimes isn't a big U guy because he's a Florida guy. You're going to give us an honest opinion as a UCF guy. Where are you on Reuben Bain Jr.? Because he's a pretty controversial player in terms of where people have him stacked. He's number 3 on my list, and that might be a little rich for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, he would probably be 6 or 7 on my list, to be honest. Okay. Now, again, mentality-wise, I love a physical player, right? Everything you want mentality-wise, Reuben Bain Jr. is. Like, he plays the game the right way as far as being physical, like physical at the point of attack, plays with power, doesn't get moved. You see his body right there. Like, he's just well put together. He's hard to move off the line of scrimmage. My biggest question is, where does he play at the next level? Like, He is a versatile piece. They do rush him inside. They rush him outside. But as far as pass rushing on the outside, I don't see the foot speed there that he'll have enough of to get on the edge and actually win and command a tackle to not be able to drive him by the quarterback. I saw it multiple times in the Louisville game. He just gets run by the quarterback because he flips his hip, but he doesn't have the foot speed to get by. And he's truly a power rusher. Now, again, I wondered would Jared Verse and that power translate? It did. I would say Jared Verse is a lot more twitchier than Reuben Bain Jr. But again, if you want somebody that is going to set the tone, Reuben Bain Jr. is your guy. But I just think the skill set of some of these other guys, I would rank them a little bit higher than Reuben Bain Jr.
It's funny you mentioned Jared Verse because in my notes when I watched him back in May, I wrote he lines up everywhere, 3 technique all the way out to 9 technique. So where do we play him, which is what you mentioned. But also he felt like a mashup of Ed Oliver and then Jared Verse with the power. I do think Jared Verse is a little twitchier. But there were concerns about Jared Verse coming out, whether he was quote-unquote twitchy enough. You just talked about that. And he probably should have been the first edge rusher taken. That's a conversation for another time. And speak to this, because one of the other notes I made as I read through them as we talk about Reuben Bain Jr., I said he had one of the best inside counters that I had seen through the summer scouting. But that to me says maybe you're not comfortable trying to beat guys around the edge with your foot speed because it's not there.
And you constantly see that, right? He always takes the inside move when he's rushing on the outside. Now, again, it's a nice counter move, but you got to think people self-scout that as well. And they're like, well, if I'm offensive tackle, I said inside. Like, does he have the foot speed to beat me on the edge? Especially because I know I'll be able to recover against him because he doesn't have that foot speed. So, again, he could get better. We talked about it earlier, the process of what happens once you finish the season. You still have spring workouts where you work and hone in on your craft. You have the spring ball to really hone in and work on your craft. You have the summer workouts, and then you have fall camp. So there could be some growth. Wouldn't be surprised, too, if he maybe even slimmed down a little bit just to work on that because he plays with so much strength and power. I don't think he'll lose much in regards to rushing inside or even playing inside against the run because he's that imposing and strong against the point of attack when it comes to his strength. And
it feels like, and you and I having this conversation a couple times now about Reuben Bain Jr., he brings to mind Javon Solomon from a few years ago, who's now with the Bills, and David Walker from Central Arkansas, who I think just got banged up in training camp. But both those guys went to the Senior Bowl, had good weeks. Those are guys you want in your locker room, but they're not going to be Jared Verse first-round picks. So it could be a situation where Reuben Bain Jr., who I think is a top 50 guy, ends up closer to being a late day 2, early day 3 guy right now, unless something changes based on the body type and what we've seen from players similar body types to previously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, without a doubt. Or does he have a Jermaine Johnson-like jump? Because going into his last year, a lot of people had him as a 3rd through 5th round pick, right? And then he elevated himself because Jermaine was a power rush guy. Like, people wondered, could he get on the edge? Did he have a diverse pass rush bag? And he showed it his senior year. So that's why I said Reuben Bain Jr. can change my thought process, but I have to see it on tape first.
Yeah, fair enough. And right now, he's number 3 on my list. I like him a little bit more than some other people, and that's okay. I mean, it's still July, so we have plenty of time to figure this thing out. All right, let's take one more break here. When we come back, we'll hit number 1 in our list. We'll see if it's number 1 on your list. I think you're still contemplating it, so you can tell us after you give us some thought in the break whether TJ Parker out at Clemson is still number 1 on the LD list, because he's number 1 with the first pick list. And we'll talk about TJ and that deep Clemson defense when we take this break. All right, Lige, number 1 on the consensus with the first pick list for edge rusher, summer scouting 2025, TJ Parker out of Clemson, and 6'3", 265. And I love me some TJ Parker. And I wonder if the love is misplaced, because you and I were talking about it, and Rand agrees. Rand likes his teammate Peter Woods a little better, the defensive lineman we've talked about previously. TJ's number 1 on my big board overall, and I think you think that's crazy talk. But I think he is juiced up, and I get glimpses in terms of the engine with which he plays. I get a little bit of James Pierce Jr., I get a little bit of Mike Green. Is there room for improvement? Yes. But are you going to talk me off the ledge on TJ? Am I overthinking this thing? Is he not quite at that level just yet?
I don't think he's at James Pierce pass rush level, but I love that you brought up the effort that he plays with, because that literally was the first thing that popped on the screen when I watched him on tape. Like, we always used to have the saying in a defensive line room, right? Who ends up on the all-22, right? The view from up top. Like, do you end up in there when the play is over? I don't believe I watched one play where TJ Parker wasn't in the all-22 version. And then also the end zone copy. Like, he was always in the picture. And he rarely takes plays off. So it's like, to have that type of motor. I go back to the Pittsburgh game, and he's chasing down the running back on a zone read from the backside. He catches him 40 yards down the field, right? And then doesn't go to the sideline. He stays in the game. So he's not a guy that's like, we talked about it, like, a lot of these guys aren't twitched up as far as like elite get off, but he plays with power, and he has some slipperiness to him when it comes to pass rush. He just knows how to get off of blockers and make plays in the backfield, whether it's on the running back or the quarterback. But the thing that really resonated with me was, even though he has all these accolades and he played at a high level, he plays with so much elite effort. And I know that's what coaches will love about this kid, because that's the one thing you do not want to have to coach is effort. And with TJ Parker, you never have to coach that.
And by the way, to your point about him showing up on the all-22, no matter the angle you're looking at it, set the Clemson record for forced fumbles in a single season last year with 6. And that's all. I mean, a lot of forced fumbles is effort, right? Right place, right time, and making a play on the ball. You're not jogging down the field. You're running 40 yards down the field to catch the running back. Had 12.5 tackles for loss in 2023. That broke the Clemson true freshman record, which was held by Miles Murphy. So there are milestones that you can look at and say, okay, this guy has a chance to be really good. But at the end of the day, if you got the 5th overall pick and you need help along the defensive line, interior, and edge rush, you're leaning towards his teammate Peter Woods?
I don't even think it's close, right? And that's no disrespect to TJ Parker, because I think he's going to be probably a top 5, top 10 pick. I just think the athletic ability and physicalness and just built in the labness of Peter Woods is just out of control. I actually just saw a video, because I heard he played around 320 last year, which was too heavy. And just to show how athletic he was, they would line him up on the edge. You go to that week 1 game versus Georgia, he was playing like outside linebacker at like 320. That shows you the type of athlete he is. But I just saw a video of him because they weighed in getting ready for fall camp, and he looks cut and lean at like 307. So it's going to be nightmares for offensive lines in the ACC this year, trying to block TJ Parker and Peter Woods. But I would definitely lean towards Peter Woods because I just think the upside of what this kid can do and the freakiness that he plays with when I talk about his athletic ability are out of this world. I think when you look at this defensive line group, it's not as deep as last year, but I think there's Peter Woods and then there's a drop-off before the next guy. Where last year there was a lot of guys, obviously Abdul Carter was the number 1 guy, but then after that there was a lot of guys that were kind of in the same realm underneath him. I don't think guys are in the same realm with Peter Woods right now. We'll see how the season progresses, though.
Yeah, and Rand Carthon said on the defensive line summer scouting last week that Peter Woods would be defensive line 1 in the 2025 draft class that just happened. Like, that's how good he is.
Defensive line 1, I might take him 1 overall.
All right.
Honestly, Ryan.
All right.
I really might take him 1 overall.
Over Abdul Carter?
No, I'm talking about like this draft class coming up.
Oh,
like,
right, yeah.
You talk about quarterback positions and everything. Like, I would probably lean towards taking a guy like Peter Woods over the potential of not knowing what a quarterback is going to be like, because I'm pretty sure that Peter Woods is going to be a sure. And again, you never want to say surefire because you just never know. But everything I've seen on tape looks like he's going to be a dude in the NFL.
All right, let me ask you this because I like to compare players from the same schools over different eras. Who would you rather have only on college tape, if you can confine yourself to that? Peter Woods and TJ Parker, or Miles Murphy and Brian Brzee, also first-round picks a few years ago?
To me, that's not a fair conversation because Brzee was hurt like his last 2 years, and he was dealing with some personal family stuff. So based off the tape, I'm thinking Parker and Peter Woods. Based off because you said we have to lock in knowing only that what we know from the college tape, right? So if it's just based off the college tape, I mean, you just said all the accolades TJ Parker had, and then Peter Woods looks like he was built in the lab. So I'm taking that combination over Brian Brzee, who's actually had a really good NFL career.
Really good.
Nobody's talked about it, which is crazy. And Miles Murphy, who is still trying to figure it out with the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm leaning towards TJ Parker and Peter Woods in that conversation.
And that's right. It's important to qualify with the stuff that Brian was going through, but he has been really good for the Saints, and that first round pick is panned out there. And speaking of Miles Murphy, similar questions with Keldric Faulk, right? Because Miles was young.
Yeah.
One of the knocks on Miles was that he was way too serious about school, which is a stupid thing to say. I mean, he was smart and he studied. You can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But he never put it all together. He had the physical tools. I think Keldric probably more upside at this point in their college journeys than Miles, but Miles had a lot of physical tools as well. So just things to keep in mind as we talk about some of these players here. All right, let's play the game here with TJ. I'll read off the 2025 edge rush class. You tell me when to stop. I mean, you stopped it ahead of Michael Williams for Keldric Faulk earlier in the show. So Abdul Carter at 3. You taking TJ Parker or Abdul?
Abdul.
All right. Well, then Michael Williams.
I'm taking TJ Parker.
Okay. All right. So now the question becomes TJ or Keldric.
I think we had this conversation, Rod. Yeah, we had this conversation about Michael. Like, his upside is, we didn't know what it was because there was times when they played him on the edge, he felt comfortable, but he also looked pretty good at times rushing at the 3 technique versus Texas, right? But again, the twitchiness just isn't there for a guy to go in the top 11, right? A lot of people compared him to a guy like Trayvon Walker, who actually had crazy twitch, or even a Tyree Wilson, so only time will tell. But if we're just basing off the college tape, I'm taking TJ Parker over Michael Williams in the draft.
All right, well, we got 266 days to figure it all out, but I always love having my guy Lige Douzable with me, especially when we're talking about defensive line and edge rushers. LD, thank you, brother. And that's it for us here with the first pick. Summer scouting continues next week. Rand Carthon will be back. We'll hit some secondary players. In the meantime, check out With the First Pick wherever you get your podcast. Scan that QR code, and we will see you in the next one.